discussion. So yeah, I wish you all a wonderful session. Ula?
Lucas, thank you very much. And it's, of course, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, because we've got a participant from the whole world. And it's a big pleasure for me to moderate this webinar and to have such a great guest. As you know, today we will talk about sustainable finance, because I think that everybody agrees that financial sector is facing now a big transition. Global banks are adopting the operating models to ensure that financing is extended on a sustainable basis. This raises an important question if banks are ready for embedding ESG into their strategies. And the next one, to how they will measure and monitor the risk from clients, and also change the nature of the dialogues with clients as they make the transition to more sustainable business models. This also presents challenges for both banks and SME clients on how to organize this new working relationship. And today, with our great experts, with our great guests, we'll talk about these challenges and we'll share good practices and knowledge how to prepare for implementation of ESG regulations. As you see, our agenda is very intensive. I know that our speakers, our guests will share great knowledge and a lot of good practices. So I think we should start. Let's start, and I would like to invite for the first presentation. I would like to invite Ken Berg. Ken will share with us AIB's journey towards 2030 zero carbon footprint bank. Ken, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Ursula. Thank you, and welcome everybody. And it's good morning from Ireland. I am from AIB Group. We're Ireland's largest bank, and we are a retail and SME bank with operations in Ireland, the UK, and in North America. You know, to speak to you today, I'm speaking in the 5th year of AIB's journey on sustainability and embedding sustainability at the heart of our business. And sustainability is one of our strategic pillars, and it is led very much from the top, from the board, from our chief executive. And we have set ourselves an ambitious target to be leaders, not just as bankers in Ireland, but nationally, as we lead the effort towards a green and zero carbon economy and footprint. You know, to that end, I suppose, as the world faces an environmental and climate emergency, I think it's really important that banks use their financial strength to lend and invest in sustainable businesses. You know, we believe that managing climate change is the most important challenge facing this generation, and finance in supporting the transition to a low carbon economy is pivotal. We're looking at creating a virtuous green circle where sustainable lending practices attract capital, the capital that supports further lending for the benefit of not only customers, but for the wider economy, and also the fragile planet, which is there to sustain us all. So in that context, we became the first Irish bank to pledge to operate as carbon neutral by 2030, using a net zero approach, and we'll touch on that. And this means cutting greenhouse gas emissions as close as possible to zero through elimination of carbon rather than buying carbon offsets, and that's important. We've already reduced our own emissions by 40% since 2014, and that's our own proprietary emissions, but also how we're engaging in our own lending practices. So we're in the next stage of those longer term measures around investment in energy efficiency and in the introduction of a new responsible supplier code. And we launched a 1 billion green bond during 2020. So the presentation this morning is more a framework, because I thought it made sense to look at some of the challenges and the opportunities around sustainable finance. And I think they exist for banks in the same way as they do for SMEs. So there's a reciprocity between the two of them. So Ursula, we might move to the second slide, please. So this is a busy slide, but effectively this is the background look at climate action. And in setting it out, the right-hand side of the slide is giving some details on net zero and effectively what that means in terms of the point where greenhouse gas emissions are reduced as close as possible to zero. And you can see some details of the key international Paris Agreement. But the piece I'd like to speak to is on the left-hand side. So you see scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. These are effectively the scope emissions, and you can look at this from a bank and from an SME, but let's look at it from an SME perspective. So what plays into that carbon footprint? You've upstream activities, be they electricity, employees commuting, business travel, waste from operations, purchased goods and services. You then have reporting at a company level, so company facilities, company vehicles, and then downstream activities around leased assets, franchises and investments. So that's it from an SME perspective. But when you look at it from a bank's perspective, the bulk of the financial services greenhouse gas footprint comes from its portfolio emissions. So who do we lend to and what do those activities generate? So it's less about our business travel and the electricity we're using in our branches and our network, but who are we lending to? Are we lending to green businesses, sustainable businesses? Where are they on that journey? And what does that mean for their particular sector? So our role is as providers of capital, and that's the way that you have to look at it, and that's the way you have to look at it from a portfolio perspective. So until now, greenhouse gas emission was very much around disclosures and the direct impact of operations, but the shift now is to that loan book, and so that's what we're looking at. And I referenced science-based targets, and effectively what we're doing now is unpicking our existing portfolio of advances, be they across key sectors, agriculture, energy, services sector, retail sector, and looking at the demography of that sector, looking at the profile of the businesses that we're lending to, looking at are they accredited in terms of the standards that are expected by government, by the industry, where are they on that transition framework, and we are effectively framing our lending targets over the next number of years based upon science-based targets that will get us to a point in 2030 where 70% of our new lending is green. So that's a very ambitious target, and it needs to be approached in a very structured way. So what that means is there are businesses that we will not do business with. Agriculture is a very important sector to us, but there are primary producers that we will not be lending to because they don't meet hurdles or standards or accreditation. So that's quite a pivot, and progressive banks are very much in that space. And if your bank is not in that space, I would urge you to think about that. Because that's where this is going very quickly, and that's what the investors in your bank, the capital providers for your bank will seek from you. We might move on to the next slide if we could. So this is about embracing sustainability, and I use three keywords: profit, purpose, and survival. And again, this is common to SME and common to banks. And that circle of social equity, economic viability, and environmental protection, all adding up to sustainability. So you can look at this two ways. You can look at it from a risk perspective, and you look at it from an opportunity perspective, and they're both very valid, and I would urge you to look at them both ways. So the risks are the impact to the environment, health hazards, negative impact on your brand. If you have an environmental event, or if you're seen to be the wrong side of the environmental fence, you may not attract the customers that you want. You may not keep the customers that you want. Consumers are demanding changes, and this is potentially going to pose disruption to global supply chains. So the efficacy of a business's supply chain is very much enshrined in sustainability. Increased costs and carbon prices. If you don't do it, you may be forced to offset your carbon footprint by buying carbon offsets. And it could be quite costly from that perspective. And then the whole policy and regulation requirements. If you don't get ahead of the curve, you're going to be forced there anyway. So you may as well get there to a point, I believe, in an advantage point where you can lead from an industry or from a sector perspective. And the corollary of that is a lower cost of capital. You will attract cheaper capital and improve financial performance, a better brand and increased competitive advantage all the way through your supply chain. Enhance customer loyalty and stickiness, improve your risk management. It's a key part of the risk management considerations, building innovation and attracting and engaging employees. We're in the market and we're actively taking on graduates at the moment, and graduates are interviewing us and asking us about our sustainability journey. They want to know what we're doing because they're excited about being part of a company that is in that space. We might move to the next slide. So when you look at this and you look at it from a finance perspective, on the left-hand side is effectively, I call mainstream products. And I mentioned we launched a $1 billion green bond last year. Sustainable project finance, green commercial building loans, sustainability linked loans, and you can see the nuances around that. You know, progressive sustainability lending sets targets for the borrowers. If they hit certain hurdles, they get a benefit, or if they achieve a certain sustainability rating, they will get a discount from a pricing perspective. We're doing it on green mortgages. Our lowest price mortgage is a green mortgage fixed for 5 years, and we reward people for have a better energy rating in their houses. That's the traditional way. I suppose the more progressive way and the emerging propositions are around social bonds in terms of raising funds for new and existing housing. We're doing that with social housing at the moment in Ireland. The one I'd like to focus on is transition finance. And this I believe is the key to unlocking the potential and the opportunity for banks and also from SMEs, is recognizing where your business customers are on that sustainability journey and helping them navigate that journey with finance that is not necessarily just for a green purpose, to buy an electric vehicle or to retrofit a business premises, but it's around financial support that addresses or allows high carbon footprint companies to implement longer term changes to becoming greener. So that's really embedding yourself in the business plan of a company to bridge that gap between traditional and sustainable finances as a business begins its journey to net zero. And that then, if you are lending for transition finance, well, then you're enhancing your own portfolio, you're building your way towards those science-based targets and those ambitious goals you may have, whether that's net zero by 2030 or 70% of green lending. So the right-hand side of that slide, I believe, is really where banks need to be focusing. On the last slide, you know, I think this is a good way of representing it, and I call this a virtuous circle for banks and SMEs. You know, banks and SMEs need a clear strategy that's integrated into the overall organization and its ambition, and it needs to not just to be woolly. We may do this or we will do this. You've got to be about the how. You've got to embed that in very much specific targets that sets the pace at which a company wants to progress. And then you've got to hold yourself to account against those targets and against your own external ratings and your performance. It's got to be embedded in risk management. It has to be in your policies. It has to be in your frameworks. It has to be built into your finance models and your information and your guidance and your reporting and your mechanisms and your KRIs and your KPIs and how you measure against those. It has to be underpinned by sustainability skills that understand what needs to be done, how everybody is bought into that every employee in your organization is an advocate. And that sits in employee engagement and training, and it's very much in the culture or the DNA of the business. Governance of sustainability has to be led from the top, has to be led from board. If it's not led from board, it just doesn't get the sponsorship. And in every strategic decision you make, you've got to be benchmarking and saying, what does this do for our sustainability agenda? What does this do for our good citizenship? What does this do for our space in supporting communities? And then the measurement pieces has to be absolutely robust. If you don't do it, if a bank doesn't do it, if you don't do it with your SMEs, others are going to do it or do it before you. And then disclosures. We are already very much held to account in terms of TCFD and the principles for responsible banking, and that there are important sources of data for ESG rating purposes. And you know, it's happening already. You know, companies and banks looking at their ESG rating and looking at where that sits in terms of their ability to attach capital. And the last piece I'll say is partnerships. Don't be afraid to embrace partnerships. Don't feel that as a bank you have to do this on your own. We're partnering with SME representative bodies. We're partnering with state energy authorities. We're using any possible means we can to build our community partnership around sustainability. And that all plays into that virtuous circle. And I suppose that, you know, the output of that is an integrated strategy and ambition that will deliver, but it is very much re-engineering the structure of your firm, your bank, your institution, how you go about your business, and what is that DNA of the business, what do you represent, and what are your cultural norms, and how are you trying to track to those, and what your ambition is. Ursula, that has been a whistle-stop tour. I've skipped through that quite quickly, but hopefully that sets a kind of a nice framework for the speakers that are going to come afterwards in terms of my own thinking and some of the things that we're doing in AIB. So thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Ken. I think that your presentation showed us, for us, that creating the sustainable finance is changing the whole organization. We need to change everywhere. We need to change the way of thinking. We need to change the way of building the relationship. We need to change the way of creating and managing the risk. So I'm happy that you start from this presentation, because I think that everybody just realized that we've got a lot of work to do, and we need to prepare for this very well. So thank you very much. I see that the questions appear on Q&A. So I will share with you this question. How is AIB working with external ratings? Do they enrich them to make them fit for purpose, or just rely on the provided input?
Sorry, could you just repeat that once more? Sorry, I missed the start of it. Apologies.
How is AIB working with external ratings? Do they enrich them to make them fit for purpose, or just rely on the provided input?
No, very much the first point in terms of, we had a benchmark in terms of where we were starting from. We looked at this both in terms of our in-house capabilities and the journey around being a sustainable firm in terms of our own operations, and then very much how we were going to influence that from a leadership perspective, and in terms of the inputs that we could bring to representative bodies and other institutions across Ireland Inc., and how we could build a community of energy in this particular piece. And with external rating agencies, we've been bringing them on that journey with us. We publish a sustainability report each year, which is endorsed and signed off at board level, which effectively sets out every element of our business across our product, our propositions, our people, our operations, and our customers, and the things that we're doing to educate external raters, but also the business customers that we want to deal with, and help them understand how important this is to us.
Thank you very much, Ken. I see that the questions appear, but I think that we'll leave the next questions for the second part of our meeting. And I'm sure that at the presentation during our discussion, our participants will get the answers for the questions. So we'll continue. Thank you very much, Ken. And then, of course, we'll continue our discussion, and then we'll go and I would like to ask Anders to share with us how to meet ESG regulatory requirements. Anders, I know that you joined us. I know that you had some problems with joining, but I know that you are with us. Anders, do you hear us? I see that we've got some. Hello. Yeah.
Thank you.
We have problems with connections. Do you hear us well?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Oh yeah, now it's better. Hello, Anders. Nice to see you. Welcome on our webinar. I know that you had some technical problems at the beginning, but we are happy that you could join us. We don't hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, we don't hear you well.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, this is so strange. Now I'm both on on computer and the cell phone.
This is our reality.
So I'm not sure which video you are seeing. Are you seeing me in the cell phone or kind of in the computer? On the cell phone. Okay, then I will try to do like that instead.
Oh, great.
And I do apologize for all the hassle. But let's get going, and I will try to shed some nuances on what Ken just talked about, but from various perspectives, both from the perspective of heading the group sustainability unit in Nordea, but also since I have one of the seats in the UNEP-FI, the United Nations Environmental Programme Finance Initiative board. And also I have started something on the side, and this will probably give you again, various nuances and also hopefully a full perspective of what's going on in the financial industry. So let's get going. And I think, as Ken already mentioned, we can move to the next slide.
Okay.
As Ken touched upon, things are happening all over, and the expectations are, I mean, they are really changing. If we look 5 years back, we were still talking about sustainability from the perspective of a few funds, or perhaps if you were a leading bank, you had green bonds, that's it. Now things have shifted extremely fast. And when we look at multiple stakeholders, all stakeholders, I mean, we talk about, of course, as we say on Nordea, customers is always first. The customer expectations from a consumer, they are interested, they want to learn more, they want to understand more or less how can their money actually make a difference. And if we look at the SMEs and even more in the corporate space, the expectations and demands on who to bank with, they are changing. Ken also mentioned this. The employees, they want to work for a sustainable company. It's the young ones, of course, but not just that. That's what we saw a few years ago. Now, when we look at more broader, I can't say all employees yet, but so now can you hear me, or is this still a lag, or can you hear me now? I'm sorry, it's now I'm hearing myself.
Yeah.
This is.
Yeah, but now we hear you well.
Are you hearing me still?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Now, yeah.
I thought I'd lost connection, so I started to run around to find a better spot.
No, now it's okay.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. But as I was saying, employees, they do care, and it's not just the young ones. We see this broadly, a clear engagement, and then on the investor perspective, we have strict demands, not just from the few front runners on the asset management space or life and pension space. Now we see the giants like BlackRock, Vanguard, and more or less all the large asset managers are putting high demands on us as a bank, especially from the climate perspective, but also what we see more lately. And here I would say that the US is actually leading, is putting demands on diversity and inclusion when they look at companies to invest in. And we also have the credit rating institutes, Standard & Poor's, Fitch, etc., who are now driving the agenda in their credit ratings. And that is primarily now on the large bank, but SMEs, I think this is the direction where we are all heading. So the coming years, it will come. So better to prepare now than later, and especially since the regulatory space is moving extremely fast. Again, as always, it is corporates that are in the main scope for the upcoming regulations right now. But as we all know, that is just how it falls. It will trickle down to SMEs as well. So I think having the dialogue both as a bank, but with the customers already today, as Ken also mentioned, kind of trying to find potential ways on transitioning moving forward. I think that is the key. But if we move forward to the next slide, and I will take the UNEP-FI perspective on this, because in the end of the day, it is easy to say that we need to change, we need to drive towards certain society goals. The banking industry has talked about aligning with the Paris Climate Agreement or aligning with the Sustainable Development Goals now for the last 5 years. But that's not very tangible. Talking about aligning with the Paris Climate Agreement, what does that actually mean? So from UNEP-FI, what we have focused on a lot during the last, I would say, 3 years, it was actually in the beginning of 2018, the first bank started to discuss about the new principles for responsible banking, which then was launched 18 months later in September 2019. So this is about setting frameworks, how to actually start to set targets, how to measure them, how to report on them, how to collaborate to reach the society goals. Again, primarily the Paris Climate Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals. So this is the overarching framework, more or less steering the financial sector right now. And in UNEP-FI, we have over 200 membership banks. And now we also have, I think we're closing to 210 or something like that, that has signed the Principles for Responsible Banking, representing more or less 1.7 billion customers worldwide. But we still have many banks to join. We are very Europe heavy still. We see more and more US banks joining all the time on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, more or less, during periods. Still a bit behind in LATAM, in Asia, and in Africa. So this is one of the things that we need to work on right now to get more banks to join the Principles for Responsible Banking. Because again, this is the overarching framework that will steer the entire finance industry. And all the front-running banks are in this. And they are also developing more kind of niche initiatives like the Collective Commitment to Climate Action, which is about exactly spot on what Ken talked about, how to set sector-specific targets. And by that, making sure that you have pathways towards net zero, both 2050 perspective, but also more near-term 2030. And we see the same on the life and pension, the asset owner side. And then also very briefly, what we have done, we just launched it, I think was 1 month ago, perhaps 2. We launched what we called a civil society advisory board with a few of the leading NGOs in the world. And the reason that we wanted to have this advisory board is to make sure that we are not just kind of talking between institutions, between banks and the UNEP-FI, that we also get a feedback loop and test ideas with NGOs that has experience from working with or together or against, in sometimes, the financial industry. So I think the combination of having peer collaboration and also getting this external input will shape all these frameworks and be a lot sharper going forward. So again, if you haven't already joined, which I know that many of you have, I mean, push your chief sustainability officer or your CEO or whoever it might be to start looking especially at the Principles for Responsible Banking, because it's not just a universal large bank like Nordea or Citigroup that can join. This is for all banks, also the small ones. And we know that it varies a lot of being a small bank towards being a universal bank. But this is, it's not a one size fits all, but it is a framework that actually fits all kind of banks from various perspectives, because it's measured by current maturity. So start looking at it. Then we can move to the next slide. I think we're already a bit behind on schedule, so I will start to move a bit faster, Ursula.
No problem.
But the Nordea perspective, can mention a few products, and we don't have to go into the volumes here, but what we have seen in Nordea during the last few years, I think 5 years back, we had 4 sustainability funds and we had green bonds. Now we have 30 or perhaps even 40 sustainability specific funds, and the volumes are really pouring into them because, again, customer interest is increasing by the minute. And we have also integrated in the tool which all advisors use on the savings advisory sessions. We have integrated questions about their preference on sustainability. And we also made sure to train all the advisors, both in the personal banking space and now also in the business banking, the SME space. And what we have seen after those training sessions and after the integration of this in the advisory tool, the customers are more satisfied, the advisors are more satisfied, and the average savings has actually increased per customer. So that is really a win-win-win, shifting money towards something good and increasing customer satisfaction. That is, I would say, the perfect situation we can create from a sustainability perspective. But also moving forward, it is great that we have seen a pickup in volumes. But if we look at the green financing space, green bonds is still such a small part. Sustainability bonds or social bonds is growing, but again, it's almost nothing yet. So a lot of focus, Ken already mentioned it, transition finance, making sure that we have pathways and customers that might not be eligible for a green loan or a green bond today. They need to have finance so they can be eligible for those kind of products in the future. And I think that is especially important for SMEs, since many of your customers might not have a project or capacity to take a green bond or issue a green bond or even a green loan. So then we need to look into how can we support the ones that are moving in the right direction. We can move to the next slide. What we have done in Nordea to make sure to actually go in the proper direction and moving away from this general talk about alignment with Paris Climate Agreement is to set specific targets. On the very long term, we have said that we want to be a net zero bank by 2050 at the latest. But then I would say even more interesting and even more important is our midterm objectives on 2030, when we have said both from the financing portfolios, but also from the investment portfolios, that we will do a reduction of 40 to 50%. So by having that kind of target, then we are in the same range, which all the scientific expertise says that we need to be in the coming 10 years to start being on the proper pathway towards net zero. And then also we have to walk the talk. We have set similar targets on our internal operations, reduction from flying, waste management, etc. But what is very important, I don't know the knowledge you have, but when it comes to financial sector, these internal operation targets, they are good. We should all kind of do our part to reduce absolute emissions, but it is the portfolios. That is the focus areas. Our indirect emissions, the financed emissions, is the absolutely most material part for all banks. So that is where we really need to put the efforts into. And what we have also done in addition to these, I mean, 2030 is still a long time. So we have set 2023 targets for the climate perspective, but also for all our strategic pillars: financial strength, social responsibility, and governance and culture. And all the 23 targets, they have annual action plans. So this is our way to make sure that we set the long-term direction, but also we become tangible. Because if we do not have these short-term targets, it is not clear to investors, it's not clear to employees, and then it's not clear towards our customers, and actually even regulators. So what we have found is when we launched this just a few months back, we have received very positive feedback on being tangible, on having this kind of targets. Let's move to the next slide to just very briefly, also as a follow-up from Ken's perspective, setting these targets. I mean, that is one thing. The short-term targets and the annual action plans, they are, of course, key. But what does it mean in practice? It actually means that we have to change risk appetite. We have to set sector-specific targets. We have to start talking to the customers and start to have engagements also with corporate and SME customers. This is something that the asset management and life and pension space has been doing for years and years. Active ownership, you probably heard about it. But now it's time to do the same. Setting a sector target, and that sector target will trickle down to customer-specific targets. And then we will have dialogues together with the customers on how to move forward towards 2030. And what is really key here, it's not about kind of finding customers that we want to kick out. That is not Nordea perspective. We want to be a driving force in enabling the transition. And the only way to do that is to stay on, to deepen and strengthen the relationship and steer our customers and our own portfolios towards the same goals. So again, it's really an engagement strategy. It's not about exiting a few of the very high emitters and then we're good, because that would not be taking our responsibility in society. And let's move on to the last part, since I think I'm already over time. Now we talked about the Unify, this kind of global framework collaboration perspective. We got a few Nordea examples on how to set tangible directions and kind of steer an entire organization. But then in the end of the day, it's about people, all of us working in the financial industry on a daily basis. Most of us will never work in a sustainability role. We are roughly, I think we're 65 million people in the financial industry globally. So what I felt was that we have strong banks, we have Unify and many other fantastic organizations, but we didn't have anything on grassroots level. How do we actually engage the employees? And if you sit in a back office or a role again where you not work with sustainability, you might want to be engaged. You might just want to raise your voice or talk about the issues. So that's why I started Bankers for Climate, which is a non-profit organization. It's completely aside from both Nordea and Unify, to create a buzz, to create awareness, to get the dialogue going. I mean, again, it doesn't matter if you sit in a back office or a product development team or in a customer-facing role. In some sense, you can all have an impact on society. You can all do something that pushes your customers to be more sustainable, or your own unit or division if you're in a larger bank. So I think key is to get the discussions going at all levels of the bank, from the board down to the desks. And I hope that these three perspectives, the bank, Bankers for Climate, and the global frameworks, will be the key that actually makes us succeed in reaching society's goals. That was the last part. And again, very sorry for the hassle with video and sound and everything.
No problem, Andres. Thank you very much. And what you've said, of course, it's, as you said, it's linked with what Ken said, because you know, we need to change the way of thinking. We need to change the way of managing and the relationship with our customers. And what is also important is the change of the whole organization, and is the change of creating and planning and preparing the business goals. I think it's also very important, because managing the climate risk make us change the way of thinking and the management of our business goals. So thank you very much for your presentation. And I see that all the time the questions appear. So I will share some of the questions, because I see that that of course there are some questions that we will answer during our next part. But for example, one of the questions that appear: do you calculate green asset ratio? If you do, which elements do you take in consideration?
We are looking at it, and we are doing some tests, but we haven't nothing that we have done publicly or kind of set an exact measurement on how to do it from that perspective. What we are doing more publicly is how we calculate financed emissions. We are part of the PCAF, the Partnership for Carbon Accounting Financials, which is, as of today, the most specific way on how the financial industry wants to or needs to calculate the financed emissions. And those, I mean, that is, as you understand, the key on having these, what is the baseline today, and due to that, how do we calculate and how do we set these targets? But the green asset ratio is a very, very interesting discussion. I'm sure that we will have a lot more clarity on that, hopefully already the coming months, or at least during this year.
Thank you very much, Anders. And I think that we need to go, because I see that, and I think everybody agree that this subject, this area is very important, but also very big. we can spend the whole day and discuss about all the topics, but we have limited time. So we'll go on the next point, to our discussion panel, when we of course continue our discussion, and we'll continue the topics that were presented during our guest presentations. Our panel will start. Chris McHugh, the director of the Centre of Sustainable Finance at London Institute of Banking and Finance, who will start our conversation, how we should create the relationship with SME clients. So, Chris, I know that you want to share your screen, so I will stop sharing, and the floor is yours.
Great, thank you very much. I just had a very few slides, and I've promised Ursula that I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time going through it. Ken and Anders and I did not get to compare notes before this, but that's good news, because you'll see there's some overlaps in our thinking. What I wanted to do is look at this slightly differently and think about what needs to work differently. So think about implementation issues. I'm going to show you a list of 3 points, which will echo what we've already heard. But my question as you go through this is, well, do you have the same understanding as your colleagues on these issues? So this idea of getting everybody to work in the same way is very important, and how to achieve that, and the skills and training that's required. So we've heard a lot about new processes and policies. In my opinion, this process of collecting and managing different information is a challenge. And this conversation about clients, again, is a challenge, and a very brief number of points on each of those. Thinking about measurement, we heard about sector-specific issues. Along with the traditional lending criteria, there is an overlay of new information that will need to be captured. So when we think about economic sustainability criteria, again, as Anders mentioned, you will need to start to form a view about the quality of sectors, the quality of growth, things that are separate from the company, the SME customer itself. You will need to start thinking about the metrics that you wish to use, and I think we'll get some standardization around those. You see, for example, in some sectors, there's a lot of focus on emissions, but I know that pulp and paper companies have started to focus on energy per ton of product, water consumption, different metrics that companies are going to have to measure. And then again, the social side, when you're asking customers what to do, what are you measuring? The gender mix, the ethnicity mix, the equality mix, how you're going to implement that is sort of a policy decision. And perhaps the very critical part is, are you using these criteria for exclusion or for transition? And that's a very fundamental choice, which will affect, again, the conversation with customers. So this new collection of material, how it is handled and what is it going to be used for, you see a sea of icons on the right-hand side of different standards and processes that might need to conform, and there probably won't be harmony across regions initially. So each region may have to think a little differently to begin with. I reflected once on my own experience about change. If I can compare this to how long it's taken to fix from the financial crisis, in 2007, when it started, I was working in a bank. My daughter was in her first year at school. She's now at university, and we still haven't finished changing the regulations. So this is not going to happen quickly. So again, this is a long process, and it is going to be grueling. But thinking about how you capture information, you don't want things stuck in PDF files and emails, and there's going to be a lot of work to make those processes work smoothly. And finally, a reflection on where we are today and where we need to be. On the left-hand side are just my circles representing business as usual and a sustainable business. So we think about what's a best-in-class model. So in any sector, what we're trying to do, I think, with ESG ratings is decide what a good company looks like. And the reality is that those companies in the 2030 to 50 bracket are going to be different again. And when you think about client transition, looking inside the bank, who in the organization is able to have the conversation with the client, and how is that going to work? And that's a particular skill set that may or may not exist in the moment. And just to give a couple of examples before I finish, Ursula, just a food for thought. As I understand it, a good quality wind power installation has a 20-year life. A good quality solar installation has a 25-year life. So all the renewable energy capacity that we currently have will end up being replaced by 2050. So this is a huge ongoing effort. And I think people and skills, how this is done and how to have these conversations is a particular challenge for the coming years. Ursula, I'm finished. I'll just stop screen sharing.
I think it was good start for our discussion. And we'll go to our discussion panel. So what is very important now? Of course, I think that everybody agree that of course we know what are the challenges, but how to implement, how to be prepared for these challenges. It's a big challenge. I see a lot of questions from our participants, but I know that our great speakers, my guests, will share good practices, and I hope will inspire our participants how we can prepare for the for ECG regulations. I would like to invite for our discussion, of course, Chris, Poya, and Christian. Poya, Christian, are you with us? I will stop sharing because I think it will be easier to see.
Yes, we are.
Yes, great.
Yes.
Okay, so
Hello,
first,
everyone.
I would like to. I prepared some questions, but of course I see a lot of questions for our participants. So I also will try to share all the questions, but I'm not sure if we have time for everything. But we'll see. So first, we talk a lot about ECG regulations, but I would like to come back to this, and I would like to ask you, Poya, how to prepare from ECG regulations from the management point of view. What would you recommend?
Yes, and I think I can just take you on a journey on how we work with it as inspiration. And to be honest, I mean, the preparation for ESG regulation is the same as for all other regulation. We have an internal group legal department working with it, of course, and coordinating, seeking alignment both within the bank across the business areas and group functions, but also with other regulation in this space, you can say. And it's of course about learning what the regulation is about and understanding the impact. And in order to do so, we conduct impact assessments. And in this case, when it comes in the ESG space, as you know, there are several regulation and legislative initiatives ongoing, you can say. So we work with impact assessments related to data, IT infrastructure, customer impact, customer climate assessments, disclosure requirements, and what that will mean for us. It's mainly about finding the gaps of where we are today and where we should be, of course, in the future when this regulation kicks in. So, I mean, since also the ESG regulation has a significant impact on our customers and our business, then we also need to conduct business-specific impact assessments, and that we do together with the business areas. And this impact analysis in the business areas, maybe I'm stating the obvious here, but this is of course very important to do together with the business. And just to be a bit concrete on this is just again stating the obvious more or less, but to be concrete when it comes to the taxonomy and the impact analysis and the scenario analysis we do there, we actually do it together with our customers for these specific sectors that are mentioned in taxonomy, because it's together with our customers we believe that we will find out the technical criteria to assess what data, the level of information that is needed, the gaps, what impact it has on our customers and us, and basically learning the technical criteria, because we don't have the expertise in all details, you can say in-house. So therefore we also rely on our customers to make this impact analysis. So if I can send you one thing is to actually reach out to customers and do these kind of impact analysis together with them.
Thank you very much. And also, I will ask you one question from our participants. If we think of existing subsectors no longer financing certain customers, do we also think of what we are going to do more?
Sorry, can you repeat? I just lost you in between.
If we think of existing subsectors no longer financing certain customers, do we also think of what we are going to do more?
I'm not really sure if I understand the question correctly, but if I do it, think of exiting subsectors, basically not financing customers. What are we going to do more?
Yeah, I see that there is reaching. I see that somebody, the person who asked this question, added something more. Reaching out to customers, also SME, as corporate clients already know about sustainability and are starting to handle this. This might not be true.
I think Anders discussed a bit around that as well. At least our main thinking around this is that we will not exit any existing relations with customers. We see in the first place we would like to do this together with them, challenging them in the transition plans, making sure that they have a transition plan and supporting them with both transition financing and products and offerings, but also making sure that they are fit for business in the future as well. But at some stage we will reach a stage where we also will say no to customers. I'm aware of that. But the thing we will do more, if I interpret the question, is that we will try to be there and challenge customers beforehand, before we exit them, to actually have a transition plan that lasts, that is good enough, so to speak. If we have the competence today to do that, no, not fully. In some sectors, yes. For some customers, yes, but not on the wide perspective. So this is something that we need to develop, something that we need to work with to be able to challenge all our customers and also assess their plans in order to be able to challenge them. So I guess that's the thing we will be doing more.
Thank you very much. And let's stay with regulations. Climate risk is a new kind of risk, because we were prepared for managing the other risk, and now climate risk is something all the time, something new. How to prepare for managing this risk? And Chris, I would like to ask you about this.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think in principle, the process of managing climate risk doesn't have to be different than any other risk. What we're missing are the models, because we don't have a history, we're looking forwards. I think there's probably things to learn for the insurance sector about how they handle unique and unusual risks. I just wanted, on the point of the climate risk, I think we have a sort of a slight discord between taxonomy and transition. I mean, the taxonomy originally was built to sort of define what is and isn't green, which is not quite the same as transition. So I think the tricky thing is we're sort of mixing up market definition of product with prudential regulation, and to have one taxonomy to do that, I think is quite tricky. So I think the stress testing side of things, yes, it can be done. There's a lot of modeling work being put in place, the lessons from the insurance sector. But after that, I think it really should be normalized as a sort of a classic risk management issue. And I think to hold it out as something different is not quite right.
Yeah, so as you said, we shouldn't be stressed that it's some kind of different risk. It's just a normal risk as we managed so far. Yeah, but of course, the new type of risk.
Yeah, it's a data problem primarily for me.
Yeah, thank you very much. And then I would like to ask all the participants of our webinar. I would like to ask the question if on what stage you are prepared for ECG regulations. So I will share the question, and we'll see the answers. Are you prepared for ECG regulations? Yes, no, partially. I see that all the time somebody is joining our question poll. Okay, so I will share the results. Do you see the results of the question? So as we see that there is some group of people, some group of banks that are ready for ECG regulations, but most of us all the time are preparing for this and have got the challenge in implementation of some solutions of some regulations and new rules of creating and working with the clients. Okay, thank you for the answer. And then I would like to ask Christian. Can you share with us what is the strategy of your bank in a sustainable finance?
Yes, definitely, and thank you for having me today. So we in Danske Bank have a clear ambition to be among the leading banks in the Nordics within the space of sustainable finance. That both Ken touched upon it, Anders touched upon it. To really succeed with that ambition, of course, you need to devote not just a team to it, you need to devote the entire bank to this. So it has to be ingrained at the core of your strategy. It has to be supported from the top of the bank, from the board, from the executive management, and all the way down through the organization, because this requires a massive change of how we work in our bank, how we advise our clients, how we work with products and product development. So how have we then done this in Danske Bank, or how are we doing this, I would rather say? We are, of course, working to make sure that our business goals are aligned with societal goals. That is for us the place to start. We need to align the incentives, both internally with what we want to achieve externally. Then it's about setting the right metrics, the right follow-up, the right monitoring. We have already also touched upon this, so I will be repeating some of what has already been mentioned today. Then it's about supporting our clients in their sustainability journey. For Anders was in on this also. The power of a bank lies in what we finance, not in our own transition, but rather in how we support our clients in their sustainability journey. This is at the core of our strategy, and this is where the massive change also lies for us. And then lastly, we believe we cannot do this alone. So it's about engaging with stakeholders and with partners to really get the right competences that may not be within your own space, but also outside. Get your stakeholders on board to support this transition. Then internally, we are working on 3 areas. It's about the advice to our clients. We need to change the way we advise. That comes through specialist functions. It comes through training our advisors, basically training our internal staff functions to also understand how do we work with this. it's about incorporating sustainability into our product and solution development. It has to be ingrained in this. We need the products to support our clients. We need the solutions to support our clients and our advisors in managing the dialogue. And then one of the key areas for us is how do we work with this from a risk management perspective. We believe that once we now have started to change our policies, to change our risk appetite, when we have integrated ESG in our risk appetite, that is when we see the real change, because that is driving behavior of the bank, of our advisors, and how we work towards our clients. So that is, in high level terms, how we have taken on the journey in Danske Bank.
Thank you very much, Chris. As you said, we need to prepare in each aspect, in each area for these regulations and for support SME. And then I would like to ask Christian, Boja, how does your bank support SME in sustainability?
Happy to hear Christian here, and with the risk of echoing what he just said, but then I'm happy for the customers in the Nordics, as we both operate in the Nordics. That we also, I mean, I see it from two perspectives. One is, of course, the offering. What offering do we have? How can we offer and make it easy for our customers to make, sustainable choices? And the other part of it is, of course, the advice part that Christian just mentioned, that we're also looking into. So it's about strengthening the both aspects. And when it comes to the product side, we've been quite successful when it comes to green lending, even though in relation to the total loan portfolio, just like Anders mentioned, it's not a big ratio of the total, you could say. But on the other hand, it's increasing quite heavily from very low levels. But I think we need to look broader than just the green financing. We mentioned transition finance. We also look into sustainability linked loans and other kind of sustainability financing options. I think that's one of the parts. When it comes to the advice, I think it's a matter of, at least in the first step, right here, right now, be able to guide our customers, provide them the guidance. And in order to also be able to do that, we need to train our advisors. So a lot of focus right now is training the advisors and creating the processes, integrated this in the advice process, so that they might be able to guide our customers. So we have something that we call the Nordea Sustainability Guide that has been launched towards customers in meetings with advisors. And I also think we need to look broader to the mass, you can say, and have it as an online tool as well, to guide our customers. So for me, it's a matter of what kind of customers we have in front of us. For the SMEs, most of our customers, they need easy advice. Can we provide them with easy self-assessment tools where they can assess, okay, where am I, how far have I come, and what's the immediate next step that I can take? Because we know that in the SME space, maybe they don't have the resources to really get all the guidance and advice they need from consultants and so forth. So can we be there for them and support them? I think that's a challenge and a great potential that we have. And then we have customers in vulnerable sectors, of course. And for those customers, we need some more hands-on and even more training on how to manage them and their challenges going forward. And then I don't think just guidance is enough. There we really need spot-on advice, just like I mentioned in the previous question, that develop a process where we can assess their plans and challenge their plans and work together with them on the plans that they have, transition plans I'm talking about, of course. That's what we need to do. So like I say, balance between our offering, but also advice and guidance to all our customers. And please bear in mind, we have almost 600,000 customers in the corporate space. So they really vary from the smallest business, owner-led to those large, maybe listed companies as well.
Thank you very much, Boja. And also, I will continue asking you, because I think the question linked about loan as green, how to measure and verify a loan as green.
Green loans. Okay, what we have is a green bond framework in Nordea, which I guess most banks might have. It's built on the green bond principles, international principles, and so that states what we in Nordea define as green. Again, built on international standards, but our kind of Bible, you can say. It's verified by an external third party to really make sure that it's also assured, you can say, the assets within it. So we have 6 categories as we define that we define as green according to the green bond framework. And then once we have cases, we go through them individually, we assess them. For some industries, for instance, the green buildings, it's more straight through, a lot easier with the certificates and so forth to define them as green. For other parts, we might need extra information from customers that might be from third-party verifiers that they have brought into this as well, to really make sure that it would be considered as green. And before we enter this asset in our green asset pool, we also have a third party verifying it from our end also, in order to avoid what can we say, greenwashing. So, but it's the green bond principles, you can say, that our green bond framework is built on.
Thank you very much. And I've got another question for Christian. The question from participants. The agenda is clear that as banks we need to develop further sustainable financing. However, the essence projects being financed tend to have a long playbook period. So it's of course linked with the higher risk, and the RIOS seems to be too shallow. So how can you manage this? What is your experience?
So I would say we also need to remember that there are also risks of not financing these. If we are not evaluating our assets or our customers based on ESG data, there's a big risk that we end up in a few years sitting with stranded assets. And that is basically what you want to prepare for. You want to incorporate this in your risk management. You want to incorporate this in your pricing, in your overall evaluation of the client relationship or the asset that you're financing, to really make sure that you future-proof your portfolio, your loan book, for the risks that we are seeing. And that is basically why we are driving this transition in Danske Bank. It is of course also to future-proof our loan book, to make sure that we have a sustainable business to run in not 1 year, but in 5-10 years, when we start seeing, when we believe that we will start seeing the changes, when we believe that we will start seeing the real stranded assets. And that is of course pushed both internally, it's also very much pushed by the regulation we are seeing right now.
Thank you very much, Christian. And then I would like, because we know the perspective from your bank, Christian and Poya, and also I would like then, Chris, you support the banks, and can you share with us the other good practices, how to get in a sustainable position as a bank? What would you recommend? And I see also a lot of questions from our participants about supporting from the government. Can you also?
Okay, I think what Christian and Poya described is, I would have a very similar answer. I mean, to summarize, I mean, if you're aligned with the policies and the technical measurement across the bank, and if you have the right knowledge and skills to match, and people understand, it's a huge behavioral shift. And everything needs to sort of point in the same direction and support that. So I think what they describe to me is what I hear is how it should be done. It's a complex, big challenge, and as Poya mentioned, the quantity of customers and the number of conversations, just a question of breaking it down into little pieces that are manageable, that people can execute. But I think, you know, as they describe it, is the right way.
Thank you very much. And there's also a question: is there any climate risk map? Did you see something like this? Do you know something like this kind of map?
That's addressed to me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Look, I mean, there's a lot of work in academia, there's a lot of work on modeling of climate shift, but it doesn't reach down to the granular level at the moment that a bank can consume to easily run client level stress tests. You're going to get sector impacts, maybe geographic impacts, and somehow that's got to be consumed by a bank and interpreted in some way. And I think through stress testing, I mean, it would be interesting to see whether, for example, in the EU, whether the regulatory stress testing suddenly then conforms to the taxonomy, which then starts to link things together. That could be good or bad, but somehow things have to be standardized. And that's what I'm expecting. I mean, it's going to change tremendously over the next 3 to 5 years.
Thank you very much. And I will come back to Christian. Christian, can you share with us what is the biggest challenge in creating the sustainable finance? Because your bank and Poja Bank, your banks are on a very high level in preparing to the ESG regulations. But as we've seen on a poll question, there are a lot of banks that are preparing for this. So on what we should be prepared? Where is the biggest challenge?
But that's a good question, and I think there are you could look at this from different aspects. We look at it. There will be challenges in the client-facing aspects, so in the internal aspects of the bank, and there will be challenges internally of the bank. If we start with the internal and also addressing the regulation. You need the support from the top of the bank. I cannot stress this enough. We have heard it multiple times today, and this is the requirements. I do think the heavy amount of regulation we are seeing in this space can be a tremendous opportunity for banks. This will become the license to operate, and this is what we need to use the regulation for, driving the transition. But the regulation can also be the biggest risk if this becomes too much of a compliance exercise. So sustainability is high on the agenda today in Danske Bank. What we want to avoid is this becoming another compliance exercise. And that is the balance you need to strike as a bank. So to use the regulation to drive the opportunity, but avoid it becoming a compliance exercise. That is especially on the internal aspects. On the external aspects, we see the SME space. I love working with the SMEs because they are so diverse in their maturity, in their professionalism, in their need for banking services. So there will be challenges in driving this broadly. The biggest of our corporates, the largest of our SMEs are demanding this. They are asking for this. We have the ability to advise them, but we also need to get the small companies on board on this if we want to drive real change in our societies. And this is where, to Poja's point, we need to make it simple. We want to make sustainability the simple choice. So you need to integrate it in the core of your business, address this as you would with any other product to this space, keep it simple, keep it easy to digest, and make it, and basically be able to advise our clients in at the same level of abstraction. So you get them on board and you start their sustainability journey together with them.
Thank you very much, Christian. And I know that Lucas has prepared his questions.
No, actually, I'm following as well the questions that we have in the chat, and I think there was a very interesting question by Germán from KBC, and I would like to build on that. How, especially Christian, you at Danske, and probably as well Poja at Nordea, are you making government to play a role in the whole sustainable finance model? I know that in Nordics, you're quite strong in building alliances around payments and joining initiatives around banks like Swish in Sweden, or for example the P27 right now, the payment scheme. So how do you make as banks, as alliance, joint institution, to make government play the role in sustainable finance? Is there an initiative that you might probably create together? Because I think that it's always a trend-setting market, I would say, in Nordics, how the future might look like.
I'm thinking in Denmark, Christian, where you have FIDA, the Finance Denmark, who has a very strong role in this, for instance, where you have gathered all the banks, and they're really driving the climate agenda and pushing all the members towards this, and have a close connection with the governments as well. That's what pops up in my mind. Of course, we have the same in what we call Bankföreningen, the banking union in Sweden as well. But Denmark really stands out. At least the last year, I would say, or last 2 years. I don't know how you see it, Christian.
Just had to unmute. Thanks. Yes, I do agree. So there is, as part of the climate plan from the Danish government, they are starting to, and as part of Finance Denmark, as Poya mentioned, the industry association, we're seeing these recommendations for running a sustainable bank. So a set of recommendations to each bank that basically make sure that the bank also starts their sustainability journey. So in that sense, we are driving behavior of the members of our industry associations to really accelerate the sustainable finance agenda. Yes.
Hey, thank you very much. And now, because we need to go to the end of our meeting, but I would like to ask one more question, but for all the participants now, to look at the perspective of our participants. What is the immediate priorities? What are the immediate priorities for your bank in sustainable finance in the next 12 months? Okay, I think that we'll end polling, and I will share the results. So it's preparing the strategy. It's the biggest for now. It's the priority. So so as we see, so I'm sure that our discussion, our presentation supported the managers of the banks in working on the strategy, and then just finalizing our meeting and our discussion panel. I would like to ask you to just in one sentence just to recommend for the managers in the banks. What would you recommend in preparing the sustainable strategy and preparing for ESG regulations? I will start from you, Christian.
But in a very short sentence, I would say stick to the core of your business, stick to where you are good today, where are the client relationship, the segments that you are strong, where are the processes or the products that you have a competitive edge, and make sure you integrate sustainability into that so that you stick to your strength and to the core of your business.
Thank you very much. And Poya?
I would then, not to repeat Christian, and I would then add, make sure you set targets. Look at the long-term targets you need to set in order to live up to society goals and the commitments that you have made. That's the first. And second, make sure that the sustainability strategy is not on the side, a standalone strategy. Make sure that it's integrated in the overall strategy. I think that's the message that I would like to send.
Thank you very much. And Chris?
Thank you. So for me, the key is its transition and impact. So I think to have a clear idea of how that's going to be executed and how that's going to be done is critical to delivery.
Thank you very much, Chris. And then I would like, I think, as our final word and our final point, I would like also to ask Ken for his conclusion and for his recommendation.
Thanks very much, Ursula, and I think that's been a really good discussion, and we've taken the subject apart in many different ways, but there are some very common themes coming through. And you know, when I hear the other presenters' closing comments, you know, at the start I was talking about sustainability being a virtuous circle for banks and SMEs, and I think we're all saying the same thing. You need a clear strategy that's integrated into the overall organizational strategy and ambition. That needs to be translated into targets to set the pace at which the company wants to make progress. And then risk management, sustainability skills, employee engagement and training, governance, measurement, disclosures, and partnerships all have a key role. So it is that very much integrated strategy and ambition. It needs to be led from the top, and it needs to be a core part of what you do in your DNA in the bank and the culture, not an adjunct or an add-on or something that we might try for a while. So that would be my summation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ken. And I would like to thank you very much for our guests. The topics we're talking today and the subject is very, very important. And as we see, it's a big challenge because it's a way of changing the whole organization and the way of thinking of our managers and of our clients. And but I've got good news for you. We will continue this subject, and we will continue supporting the banks in this very, very, very challenging subject. As EFMA Business Academy and Advisory, together with partnership with London Institute of Banking and Finance, we will prepare some support, the new support and the open course for the people who would like to strengthen their knowledge and to get more good practices. So we'll continue this topic. So I would like to thank you very much for all our guests, and I will ask Lucas for the last words.
Thank you so much, Ula, for taking the lead in this webinar. Thank you so much to all the participants that you joined us today. Here you can see in front of you a couple of last slides about all the other and further initiatives and events that we have in SME banking program as part of the first community that was introduced in EFMA. I have a great news because we have noticed that sustainability is hot topics for many bankers right now. And following this first webinar, we will definitely introduce in some extent another community which will be dedicated for further discussions around sustainability, and especially in not just in SME banking, but in a general approach of the financial sector towards this topic. So stay tuned with us for the few further initiatives that we'll be running. Here you can see just an overview of the map of different institutions who are already engaged, and we hope to still increase the presence of many of you in our SME banking initiatives. As Ula mentioned, this was an exceptional initiative organized in a collaboration with EBA, so one of our division dedicated, let's say, to on-demand services for our members. And I'm sure that many of you might still have further questions, so feel free to reach out to Ursula whether there are some programs dedicated for banks or whether we have some open webinars or open lectures together with London Institute of Banking and Finance towards this topic. Thanks again to all the Nordics participants, wonderful examples. Thanks to Ken, and yeah, see you next time. Have a great day.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.